we're going to ask you, oh, got it. We're going to ask you to do a little bit of work today. We're going to have a poll to sort of see what you're anticipating might be issues post-pandemic for students. We're going to be talking about improvement science, which is ways that we can sort of use methods from improvement science and education to prepare for our information literacy and digital literacy teaching post-pandemic, and kind of begin to make educated guesses about where issues might arise. So we'll go to the next. So I want to kind of send it off to Maria, who will talk to you about what kind of problems student success post-pandemic might be.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. You may see on your screens that I say student success equals wicked problem. You may be thinking, what is a wicked problem? Let me tell you. A wicked problem is something that is difficult to solve. There are multiple perspectives and definitions. If you just look at student success, what does it mean for you? Does it mean that your students get scholarships? Does it mean better employment? Does it mean higher GPA? Student success is a socially complex problem with continuously changing actors. The student bodies are changing, the teachers are changing, all the behaviors are changing as well. And we've seen that in this past year with the pandemic. Wicked problems, they usually extend beyond the walls of educational institutions, libraries, and involve the larger community. That is why I say student success is a wicked problem. I have borrowed this slide from another slide deck that I had prepared, and we can talk about student success in the near future in much greater detail, but please note that I'm not talking about one student here. I mean the student at large, the student community, the student bodies in large. It is also a wicked problem to solve because there is no clear singular solution. It is interdependent, it is multi-causal, which means that one solution is not going to work. And the other multiple solutions that exist out there, they can also lead to unforeseen consequences. I'm not implying at all that it is impossible to solve, but I'm only emphasizing on how it is a wicked problem.
So I've begun to think a little bit about, just as the parent of a high schooler, what we might be seeing when students come to college in the fall, and what the impact of post-pandemic knowledge gaps might be on us as higher education librarians. So some of the things that we might see that I began brainstorming are inequities in digital access, skills, and comprehension. Students may have been doing their work on a broken computer. They may have only been able to work on a cell phone throughout the past year and a half. They may not have been able to access their databases because they were off campus based on kind of what the level of database access was for their schools. They may not have seen a librarian. They may have had kind of a really anemic kind of set of instruction because that was what they had to have during the pandemic in a fully online environment. And so librarians might not have been able to come to their classroom the way that they would have in a regular year. They may be unprepared for college. They may not have seen their school counselor the way that they might otherwise have, or had career counseling. They may be coming to you with a more kind of confused, nervous, anxious kind of place. And they also may not have learned how to act in college. They may not have gotten the kind of preparation that they otherwise would have for the sort of norms of the college environment. And so when we as librarians come into a classroom, we can't take certain things for granted. We can't take for granted that they've seen a database on a computer before, or that they even know how to, say, print an article off. And so these are some of the things that, because these inequities might exist, especially based on kind of income inequities for students who might not have had access to a computer, we may have to begin at a different place when we begin our instruction. So these are some of the kind of brainstorming that I've done. I'd like to launch a poll now so that we can see what you might anticipate as some of the problems that we'll see post-pandemic. This is a multi-choice poll, so it's like ranked choice voting. We'll see kind of what people think might be the problems that we'll encounter, and we can begin discussing. Note that there is an other choice for the poll. If we didn't anticipate what you think might be a problem, please go ahead and throw it in the chat. We really want this to be an interactive session. So I'm going to launch the poll, and you'll see what do you think will be some of the ways that we can address post-pandemic knowledge gap? Do you think that we can use quizzes? Do you think that we can use active learning? What are some ways that you anticipate kind of working through it? Are you going to use one-on-one research sessions, outreach and counseling? I love watching this in real time, but what are the ways that we're going to address it as librarians? Seems we're still going.
It's really interesting to see how it's changing too.
Yeah. Remember, you can choose all of them if you want, but we're going to make you talk about it.
And if you're choosing other, could you put it in the chat what you mean?
All right, we've got 49 people who voted, so I want the other, 24 of you to give me some idea of how you think you might address post-pandemic knowledge gaps. Oh, Lisa says starting a personal librarian program for both first-year students and second-year students. I love that. Asynchronous recorded mini lessons, says Neil, MP4 files. So those are videos, it seems like. Using tools and experiences that we gain from hybrid learning. I love the idea of using the struggle to sort of inform the future. That was Marianne. All right. I don't want to take too long on the poll, so I'm going to go ahead and end polling. But it seems like most of you are interested in using some form of active learning for assessment in the library classroom to sort of address post-pandemic knowledge gaps. Active learning is kind of an overarching umbrella for all of this, so that makes sense. One-on-one research sessions are also really popular. I think that's kind of the bread and butter of what we do as librarians. And oh yeah, so let me share the results. Sorry, thank you, Susan. Folks are going to be using classroom interventions. Outreach and counseling comes next. And then I loved some of the ideas from others. Does anybody want to unmute and talk a little bit about how they chose what they want to use to address post-pandemic knowledge gaps? Oh, Kathy says, I like active learning, but it may create anxiety in some students. I think this was true both before the pandemic. I think that students sometimes prefer a kind of lecture style. Classroom, teacher, and librarian collaboration has always been important and will be extremely important for addressing gaps. I completely agree. And so I see that as kind of doing an informational interview before you enter the classroom to sort of get a feel for what the students need from the teacher. I don't know if that's what you meant, Megan, but feel free to elaborate. I know it's intimidating to unmute, but you guys are welcome to speak up too. I really enjoy consultations. It's great when faculty emphasize meeting with me. One this summer gave students extra credit to meet with me in Zoom, says Kathy. I agree. I think one-on-one research sessions and consultations are where I get the most kind of bandwidth out of my work with students. And I think that they work better than one-shot information literacy sessions for me and my students. Oh, Kanisha is raising a hand. Do you want to go ahead and share?
Yeah, and I'm not fully sure. Well, hi everybody. But I'm also not fully sure how to form this idea I have. But I think the active learning strategies or the different strategies that were in the poll are great. Sometimes I wonder if it's like, should we also think about the content that we're going to put in front of students who have not had what I'll say are like maybe traditional or expected types of engagement with libraries or library resources. I think that students have been very resourceful and have tried to navigate different information spaces without traditional guidance. And so I wonder if there's a way to center those strategies they've developed. Maybe we'll have to engage them in some sort of process if those strategies weren't in line with like our ideas of like integrity and copyright and all that kind of stuff, but also just to see what is it have you learned how to do and how can that maybe inform the content of what we share or the way we talk about engaging in library spaces or engaging with information sources, things like that. I don't know if I'm making total sense right now.
No, I think that this is an amazing idea, kind of using the pandemic as a model for kind of the hustle of research. I always talk about kind of finding the keywords or the places to find your articles as a hustle, and that's what we needed. When we didn't have the formal spaces that we were accustomed to, right? So I've talked about trying to find information on, say, bullying in the psychology classroom, and most librarians would then show them PsycInfo or a psychology database, but perhaps your articles are in an education database or they're in a different place than you're accustomed to. And so you have to kind of have a little bit of hustle, have a little bit of pickup in order to figure out the best place for your research. And I think that that's kind of what they had to do in the pandemic, right? They had to have some hustle and have some initiative in order to get what they needed.
We are going to be talking about this shortly, but I also love that you raised the point about elevating wisdom from the community, from the actors, from the students who are experiencing this. And that is a really important point.
Let me see if there's anything else in the chat before we move on. I wish as school librarians, we could take a lesson from the college crowd and do more of an embedded librarian model in the K-12 population. I don't have a ton of K-12 knowledge, but I agree that when I have the most success, it's with being an embedded librarian in specific subjects and really having a knowledge of my subject base and what they're doing in order to focus my instruction. So why don't we move on to our next topic, but we'll keep this discussion going as we get to our Jigsaw discussion, kind of how we're anticipating and what we're doing. So some of the examples of student-focused active learning that I did pre-pandemic that I want to talk about are, I would do pre and post quizzes with Kahoot, which has a timed element. And so it's kind of like game show style and students tend to think it's pretty fun. I would be really explicit when I was doing this, that if students don't have knowledge of the topics I'm talking about, that's okay. I'm just trying to help assess where to begin my lesson. And I'd have a number of different sort of possibilities for my lesson prepared so that I could meet students where they were. Sometimes, especially in, I'm a science librarian, so especially in human anatomy and physiology, students would have seen me and already had the lesson I prepared done in a previous class. And I wouldn't know that till I physically saw them in the classroom. So a quick quiz would tell me, oh my goodness, they don't need another lesson on citation. Let's focus on kind of more elevated searches in PubMed or something like that. When I'm trying to assess student understanding in kind of the middle of my lesson, I'll do a think, pair, share. I'll give them a topic that really kind of needs some time to marinate or needs more thought. For instance, an opinion question like, Do you think that news organizations present primarily fact-based information? And then I'd have them kind of think about it for a minute, pair up with a colleague, talk about it, digest the topic, discuss it together, and then each group would report out. We do this pretty quickly, but it's a very good way of assessing whether students even understand what I'm talking about at all. It's quicker than kind of going and calling on each student, and it feels a little bit less intimidating if one of the pair is shyer than the other. But it is an efficient way to sort of understand whether students process the content. The next thing that I do is I try to sort of, and this is tough because sometimes we only get an hour with students all semester, but I try to leave at least 15 or 20 minutes at the end of a session for a lab style searching session. So if I know students will have to have, say, 5 articles from a particular database for their class, I'll have them search in front of me in a computer classroom and print out at least 1 article. And I'll try to be really explicit. So I want you to have 1 empirical article that talks about digestion and its effects on exercise from PubMed. And apparently my Alexa thinks I just said computer. That will help me quickly assess whether students understand and are able to then use the skills that they need from my session when they get back to their dorm room or their home. So these are some of the ways that I worked pre-pandemic. I don't know if they're going to work post-pandemic. And so what I want to do is I want to hand it off to Maria, who will talk a little bit about how we can begin to predict what the needs of our students will be and the best ways to address them using the methods of improvement science. So we're borrowing from education research to try to try to begin to address these issues in the library world.
Thank you, Jenna. So improvement science is actually not new. It has been used in public health for a number of years before it started getting popular in education circles. There are 6 main principles of improvement science, and these are from Carnegie Foundation, whose work has been monumental. The first principle is always about making the work problem specific and user centered. It's not about the people, it's about the problem. It starts with a single question: what specifically is the problem we are trying to solve? It is about engaging participants early and often, but remaining focused on the problem. We also need to understand how the performance varies. Variation in performance is the core problem to address. The critical issue is not what works, but rather what works for whom, under what set of circumstances, what set of conditions. So we need to see the system that produces the problems. We need to see the system that also produces the solutions, the outcomes. It is difficult to improve what we fully cannot understand. And that is also why we need to understand how local conditions, they shape work, they shape processes. And those are the ones that we need to think about in making hypotheses clear. Fourthly, we cannot improve what we cannot measure. We need to embrace measurement. We need to look at data. We need to understand how things are improving or how they are not improving. It is all about engaging in rapid cycles of conducting work, planning, studying, and acting on it to learn fast, to fail forward, and then improve quickly. And then it's also looking at the wisdom of the crowds. It's about accelerating and organizing as networks. It's about looking at our collectiveness. This is what I understood from the improvement science principles from Carnegie Foundation, and I adapted it to the domains of improvement science. And as you can see, the first point here is also about being problems focused. Whether it's student success, think about what aspect of student success. How do you fill the knowledge gap? You also have to contextualize that the critical issue is not about the best practices, but rather what works best for whom, under what set of conditions. Elevating community authority and wisdom is the core of any problem that we are trying to address. We don't need people coming from outside to tell us what is wrong with our communities, why we are unable to solve the problems. We are experiencing them, our students are experiencing them. And I also want to talk about failing forward. I think we as people are so afraid of failing. There's such a negative connotation to it. And we need to change the mindsets over there, because failing is a part of learning. How can we succeed if we cannot fail? How can we, the problem here is not failing, but the problem is not learning from that experience. And that is why we need to change our mindsets. We need to change our beliefs and our assumptions for that systematic change overall. I started talking by calling student success a wicked problem. And one of the reasons why I called it a wicked problem was because there are multiple solutions and there is not a singular solution. That is, I bring it up because I have it on the slide, the word solutionitis. What is that? Well, basically, we all have tendencies to jump to implementing quick fixes, solutions before we fully understand the cause of the problem, or the system that causes the problem, or how other possible solutions might interact with our system and may perpetuate the problems. So instead of jumping to quick fixes, we need to understand the core of the problem. That is why I caution against solutionitis. It is about focusing our collective efforts. And I'm just saying this as a reminder that collectively as a community, we need to look at the problem and the system, think about our theories of practices, and then look at the change ideas we have been trying. What is it that works? Under what circumstances? And how do we spread that and scale our positive efforts? Today's session is actually quite an interactive session. We wanted to do a root cause analysis. There are more steps to a root cause analysis, but for today's session, we're just going to stick with the first three. At a glance, this may look very simple. You know, what are we talking about? We're talking about defining the problem, collecting data, and then identifying the possible causal factors. But if you take a step back and then think about the first step, define the problem. What seems to be the problem? What are the specific symptoms of that problem? And what do you see happening? If you think about just the first step, there's a lot to do with perception. Then comes the second step about measurement. Have you thought about how long the problem has existed? How long these knowledge gaps have existed that impact student success? And what proof do you have that they exist? Is it the report cards or is it something else? And how has it impacted other things? Then the third step, which is getting to the root cause analysis. The possible causal factors. What are the other problems that surround the occurrence of this central problems? Are there any conditions that allow the problem to perpetuate? And what is the sequence of events that leads to this problem? So while you're thinking about this, while the slide is right in front of you, I want you guys to think about the knowledge gaps that impact student success in your classrooms, in your institutions. What we will be asking you to do is ask why 5 times. Answer that why 5 times, and then come up with a change idea or an intervention 5 times till you get to the root cause. This may seem like a simple activity, but you will be surprised by what you find by the time you ask why 5 times. An example that I use all the time is, let's say my computer is not working. And then I ask why. The answer is, it is not charged. Intervention, I charge it. Is it still working? Is it not working? Why? Is it a problem with the hardware or the software? What do I do about it? So you get the idea. Just ask why 5 times. You may be wondering that once you get to the root cause, what comes next? Well, this is not what we want you to do today. We only want you to stick to the 5 whys, but I still wanted to discuss this very briefly, that once you understand the root cause, then it's time to get on an improvement journey. Improvement science is a very systematic inquiry, and it uses driver diagrams to focus improvement efforts on high leverage areas. So you have to be very specific. This is what a driver diagram typically looks like. There's an overarching goal. In this case, it can be student success. And then the aim is a subset of that goal. There are primary drivers that directly impact our goal that we're trying to achieve. Then there are secondary drivers and the change ideas. An example of this is right in front of you. If I want to, here is my goal, improve the retention rate for college students. Then here's the primary driver. I need to target university policies by collecting information about academic advising and student orientation. And one way to do that is to include an outreach effort to make sure students understand how processes work and how to take courses while looking for red flags of struggle. A personal improvement plan could be something like a better mental and physical health. How do you do that? You try to improve your sleep quality. And these are the things that you can do. So these are specific change ideas to help you improve your health. When evaluating goal statements or improvement interventions, it is extremely important to be specific, have measurable goals, be time-bound, and keep in mind the audience and the context. So for this session, we are only going to ask you to ask why 5 times. That is the root cause analysis, 5 whys, 5 answers, 5 interventions. And Jenna's going to be talking a little bit about the Jigsaw session.
So a Jigsaw session is essentially an active learning tool where you have kind of smaller groups of students discuss a problem that is a piece of a larger problem, and then present out to the group on what they discovered. So think of it as like a regular jigsaw puzzle. You each solve a piece of the puzzle and then you put it together, and hopefully you come up with a solution. So we're going to be putting you in a breakout room. If you haven't done breakout rooms in Zoom before, essentially you're going to see a pop-up inviting you to join one of 3 breakout rooms. And you just have to click join, and you'll move into a discussion with some of your colleagues, and each of you will have to address one of the problems that we've posted in the chat. We've also in the chat, and you should be able to access the chat once you get to the breakout room. We've also put some topics for discussion in the chat that you're going to see up on your screen in a minute. We'll give you about 5 minutes to spend in your breakout room, and then we'll pull you back and we'll ask you to report out. So do you want to put up the kind of discussion prompts within the breakout room? So,
yes, we're not asking you to solve the problems around student success that we had on the screen. We're only doing this as a simple exercise to help you get to the root cause of the problem. So it's just the 5 whys. That's the 5 whys, the 5 answers, and the 5 interventions that come to your mind. This is this is a wicked problem. We're not going to be able to solve it in 5-10 minutes or an hour today. So.
And so group one will be kind of discussing the difficult transition for students from high school to college. We'll have group two discussing the difficulty of individualizing instruction at the college level. And group three will talk about the trouble assessing and responding to the needs of students during library instruction. We've put these problems in the chat in case you forget them or kind of need to review them. We've also put the discussion in the chat. And again, you should be able to access the chat once you get to your breakout room. So I'm going to go ahead and put you in breakout rooms. And you're going to be assigned automatically. So no hanging with your friends. And I'm going to open the rooms now. And again, you just have to click join. I'll go ahead and I'm going to move people to rooms if they haven't joined yet.
I'm going to broadcast a message. I think they should be able to send us a message, right? If they need captioning.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it seems we're in room one right now.
So we're actually not in any room.
Okay.
Yeah. I stayed out just in case I needed to move people.
Got it.
Captioning. Okay. Because there should be someone in here.
Okay.
Where did she go?
Moving people to rooms if they haven't joined just to make their life easier.
I'm just going to stay out of one just in case I need to move the captioner around.
Got it.
And I see she's in room 3, I think. I lost her.
Talking about the difficulty individualizing instruction at the college level, which I know Chris also began to talk about. Oh, so Kathy says in one-shot college library sessions, there's little time to pre-assess, and sometimes a professor can provide this to the librarian, but some teachers don't have subject expertise. And some librarians, I know I run into this, especially in, I don't have a background in the sciences, and so often I'll have to ask the subject specialist to kind of define or even provide me with keywords, because I might not even have a knowledge to produce keywords for searching. So does anyone else in group 2 have things to add about this?
I want to say something. My name is Bernice. Todd was saying something. He didn't realize how it works at the college level. There are subject specialists like that you have just said for different disciplines in the college. But if you're a librarian at the research desk and you don't have that specialty, the good things about college libraries now, they have LibGuides. Go to the LibGuides and you can get access to the different resource databases, even keywords, key concepts. And this will be very helpful for anybody who is in a community college library or a senior library, a four-year college. And I mean, I work in colleges for 30 years. And I worked in library administration in Brooklyn College. So I'm not only a student, I mean, I'm I'm alumna there for political science and for library science. But it's interesting, the that when you need to help students in individualized instructions, LibGuides can be an absolute asset. That's what I have to say.
Absolutely. I love the subject guides, especially when I'm sitting and getting a question from, say, the social sciences that I don't have a background in. Anyone else have something to share from group 2? Why don't we go ahead and talk to group 3 now? So group 3 was talking about trouble assessing and responding to the needs of students during library instruction. So does anyone from group 3 have anything to share from your discussion?
I was in group 3, but I think I'll wait for somebody else to go first before I speak from the notes that I took.
We talked about inequities among students, and a couple of high school people talked about how the students don't want to have their screens on during virtual instruction because they don't want to share what their home life is like, or they're not dressed yet because they're still in bed, or they don't want their little brother running behind them in his underwear, running across the screen. So that can be a problem. And sometimes if you've got more than one kid in a family who's trying to get online at the same time, and you've got a terrible bandwidth, then you can't really have your screen, your video on, because it eats up too much width. So, and we didn't get much farther than that, did we, Maria?
No, 5 minutes was 5 minutes was definitely not enough. But I think one of the things that we also spoke about briefly was the control part of it. That when I think we were talking about the private space and the family structures. Towards the end, we spoke briefly about, rather I was talking about it, that how students may not feel ready to learn because they are feeling so conscious of what's going around in their homes, and they don't feel like they have the control to be able to focus. So that's about looking at how students also experience this.
So I want to open it up to the broader group now that we've heard from the kind of jigsaw. So do you have questions about improvement science and its application for library instruction that we could talk about, and maybe gather ideas from the group's wisdom, the collective wisdom, or ways that active learning can help you assess student understanding in the library classroom? And also, do you have any questions for myself or Maria about things that we've talked about and presented? We really want to open the floor to kind of the collective wisdom here.
Any thoughts, any concerns, any criticisms to what we've spoken about? Anything?
So Kathy asks, and I think this is a question for you, Maria, is there a relation between performance improvement techniques and design thinking?
Yes. Improvement science draws a lot on design thinking. It's all about a systematic inquiry. In fact, there is a book on design thinking to improve classrooms that came out, I think, in 2019. I'll find the name of that book and I'll share it.
And Susan says this is like a real life example of what we talked about in group 3. People who don't know each other feel awkward sharing in Zoom. This is true. And hopefully, if we're able to return to the classroom, we're able to kind of create that community space that feels a little more comfortable. However, after a year and a half of the pandemic, students may not be accustomed to discussing out loud.
You raised such a good point, Susan, and I just want to bring attention to a common theme here, which is about elevating community wisdom, looking at what the participants in different communities and understanding how they experience problems. The sort of trust building that we need and the relationship building that we need to get to solving problems takes a long time. That is also why I connect that with solutionitis. I connect that with a systematic inquiry, and I connect that with student success being a wicked problem as well. What we experienced in 5 minutes today, just put yourselves in the shoes of our students, you know.
I also want to flip that and say instructors may not be accustomed to student participation after 18 months of a pandemic. I know I try really hard to pause after asking a question and allow a minute of silence so that students who need that moment to sort of gather their thoughts and then speak have it. But I know it's hard for me to get comfortable with a minute or two of silence in an instruction session.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Maria. I don't know if anyone we have a couple minutes left, and we're followed by lunch. I know everyone always likes to and the 11 o'clock session is a little early so they can relax and have a little lunch before the 1 o'clock session. But if anyone has any further questions, you can put them in the chat or unmute yourself. Just remember, I see that Rebecca's putting the links for the CE and the CTLE certificates in the chat now. So please remember to do that before we close the webinar. As I said, we now have a 1 hour break for lunch, and the next presentation will be at 1 o'clock. An inadvertent opportunity, open access, digital equity, and high school college collaboration. And you can access it from the Pillars program or from the website at 1 p.m. And let's see, Martha asks, are you sharing the slides? Yes, we're going to be putting the slides for all the sessions up on the Pillars website. It'll be a few days before everything gets up there, but we'll send out an email to everyone who's registered for the symposium after the recordings and the slides and various handouts are available on the website. So, yep. And Maria says, thank you for joining us.